Hello, everyone, and welcome to Registrar Corp's webinar entitled U.S. FDA Regulations for Dietary Supplements. My name is Jonathan Rhodes, a marketing specialist at Registrar Corp, and today's moderator. This presentation will conclude with a live question and answer session. You may submit a written question anytime during the webinar by using the Ask a Question feature in the top center of your webinar screen. A recorded copy of this presentation will be sent to all registrants. I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Bracy Parr holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Communication from St. Louis University's Madrid campus. Mr. Parr is based at Registrar Corp's headquarters in Hampton, Virginia, and serves as a regulatory advisor for food safety services. Mr. Parr analyzes the major regulations under the U.S. FDA Food Safety Modernization Act and assists companies in understanding the rules and identifying their requirements. He developed and manages Registrar Corp's FSMA Compliance Wizard, an online tool that helps facilities determine their requirements under the Act. Anna Beneventi holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Biology from the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. Ms. Beneventi has over 8 years of analytical research experience. She serves as Registrar Corp's Director of Labeling and Ingredient Review and has researched thousands of products to determine whether they meet FDA requirements for compliance. Ms. Beneventi is based at Registrar Corp's headquarters in Hampton, Virginia, where she manages a team of 15 regulatory specialists. I'd like to go ahead and begin. Bracy?
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Today we will be discussing U.S. FDA regulations for dietary supplements. And so our objectives for the outcome of this webinar are to understand first how the U.S. Food and Drug Administration works. Secondly, understand FDA regulations specifically for dietary supplements. And then thirdly, understand how Registrar Corp can assist you, whether you're a manufacturer, processor, packer, holder, or seller of dietary supplements. We'll first talk a little bit about how the FDA works. There are a lot of common misconceptions about the FDA that we'll be clearing up here. Secondly, I'll turn it over to Anna to discuss what exactly is a dietary supplement, because the answer is not that easy. Thirdly, we'll go into specific regulations for dietary supplements, which range from registration and having a U.S. agent for foreign facilities to food safety requirements and master manufacturing records. So without any further ado, let's get to it. Many times, customers come to us and ask, am I approved? How can I get FDA approval? Are my products approved? Do I need to submit my labels to FDA? For conventional and dietary supplements, both being food, FDA does not approve them. There is no pre-market approval for finished dietary supplements or any conventional foods. You don't need to turn in information about your products. You don't need to submit labels, have an inspection before marketing your products. Really, for food and beverages, FDA acts more like the police. You can imagine, perhaps in your home country, people may speed on the highway. If they're going more than the maximum velocity permitted, well, the police can catch them. That is how the FDA operates. They expect everyone to comply with the rules and regulations in place and enforce these rules and regulations through inspections, refusing the importation of your products, making it difficult to import your products by putting them on import alert, which we'll discuss here in a bit. They can issue warning letters. There's just a lot of negative consequences that can come from not complying with dietary supplement regulation. And so now we've arrived at the question, what is a dietary supplement? And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and labeling review expert, Anna Beneventi.
Thank you, Bracy. Okay, so sometimes we encounter a fair amount of confusion regarding what exactly constitutes a dietary supplement. When considering whether or not your product is a dietary supplement, it's important to understand that FDA classifies products often primarily based on the intended use. So the most common categories of products that FDA oversees would be a conventional food or beverage, a dietary supplement, drug, or cosmetic. So if you're asking yourself whether or not your product is a dietary supplement, it's important to remember that because FDA classifies products based on their intended use, the labeling plays a very large role in how FDA will classify it, because intended use can be determined from the claims made in reference to the product, as well as the types of ingredients found in the product. So this intended use can be inferred not only from the label that's actually on the product, but anything associated with the product. So for example, promotional materials, advertising, and any other relevant factor. Of note, websites are a very common way that FDA determines the intended use of the product. So for example, if a product doesn't make any sorts of claims on the bottle or the box that the product comes in, but makes multiple claims on the website, FDA will use that website to determine whether or not the product is in compliance. And it doesn't matter whether the website is available worldwide or just to U.S. consumers. FDA will use websites, and they do that very frequently. So the difference between conventional food and dietary supplement often is just simply what the product looks like, as well as the intended use. So when we talk about conventional food and beverage, we're talking about foods that are in the form in which they've traditionally been consumed. So fruits, vegetables, bread, vegetable oils, mushrooms, beverages, all these would be considered quote-unquote conventional food. Dietary supplements are a subset of food, and their intended use is to supplement the diet with specific dietary substance, and it does not purport to be a conventional food. So, for example, rather than having that beverage of tea, you might have a green tea fat burner in a liquid soft gel. Rather than consuming an actual berry, you might have an acai berry extract that's in a tablet. Or instead of consuming normal mushrooms, you might have a triple mushroom complex that's in a gelatin capsule. So these, while food, are not really in a conventional food form, and they're being marketed as a supplement specifically to increase your intake of that dietary substance found in the tea and the berry or the mushroom complex.
Thank you, Anna, for that insight. Next, we're going to discuss some specific regulations with which dietary supplement manufacturers, processors, packers, or holders may need to comply with. The first would be food facility registration. So after the events of 9/11, Congress passed the Bioterrorism Act of 2002, which directed FDA to promulgate regulation about registration for any facility that manufactures, processes, packs, or stores food, which includes dietary supplements that are meant for consumption in the United States. When you do this registration, there are some facilities that are exempt from this. Trading companies, if you never physically handle the dietary supplements, you're just a buyer and a reseller, and you never store it, you never really touch it, you do not need to register. Personal residences, if you are a home-based business and making dietary supplements, likewise, you are exempt from this registration requirement. If you're just transporting them, if you are a retail food establishment, such as a grocery store, a GNC, a dietary supplements shop, you don't need to register. You only need to register if you are manufacturing the supplement, processing it, packing it, or storing it. When you do the registration, FDA will require you to submit a lot of data. This data includes your facility information, such as your name, corporate entity type, your location. It will require you to have contact information, like a telephone, email address, as well as information about your specific products and what activities you perform to these products, whether you're holding dietary supplements or manufacturing dietary supplements, etc. Every 2 years, you are required to renew this food facility registration, and it always happens on even-numbered years. So this year, 2018, is an even-numbered year. You will be required to renew your registration from October 1st to December 31st. Otherwise, it may be canceled. When you register, you consent to an FDA inspection. That means that you are telling FDA, yes, I understand the rules and regulations and am in compliance with them. Registration is not an approval. Registration is merely a notification to FDA that you are producing food or beverage products for consumption in the U.S. If any of you have ever shipped products to the States and discovered that your shipment was detained, it's quite possible that your food facility registration was not properly renewed during the food facility registration renewal period. You want to ensure this year that you do renew your registration, otherwise you may have problems at the border. Non-U.S. facilities, so those located outside of the United States, have to designate a U.S. agent at the time they do their registration. There is a verification step whereby the U.S. agent accepts the designation and has to submit a code to FDA. You want your U.S. agent to be someone knowledgeable. Your cousin Bob might be cheap, but Cousin Bob might not know FDA regulations to prevent any problems for you and your products, and essentially your sales. The U.S. agent is responsible for coordinating an FDA inspection, responding to FDA actions and communications 24/7, and also paying FDA reinspection fees should there need to be a reinspection at a facility who has not passed their first inspection. Whereas registration is a one-time process for one facility, it's not required for products, it's just for one physical location, and the U.S. agent is one person that you or company that you designate in the United States. Prior notice is a different type of requirement. It is a notification to FDA for every shipment you send to the U.S. It includes information about the shipper, the facility, the products, as well as the carrier. It can be filed by anyone, but if you do not file it, your product will be detained in port and will not be able to pass customs. An important note about prior notice is that it is required even for samples. So if you are sending samples, dietary supplement samples, to a potential buyer, you must still register, have a U.S. agent, and submit prior notice for that sample. Again, registration is not an approval. Prior notice is not an approval. They are notifications to FDA that you are manufacturing, processing, packing, or holding dietary supplements, and then prior notice is a notification that you are shipping dietary supplements to the United States. I'm going to turn it back over to Anna again to discuss some of the finer points of dietary supplement labeling. And just to mention, labeling is one of the biggest issues for which products get stopped at the border, so your label and having it compliant is very important.
Thank you, Bracy. And as Bracy just said, it is a very common compliance issue that companies encounter because the labeling regulations can often be very confusing and difficult to implement onto a product label. Long story short, these are the minimum required statements that should be incorporated into the label of a dietary supplement that's going to be shipped to the United States. So the label that the retail consumer would see must include these. You'll have what we call the statement of identity, which is the product name. It must identify itself as a supplement and as a dietary supplement. You may replace the term dietary with the type of ingredients that are in the product, but you must have one or the other. Food supplement is not sufficient, nor is functional food, which does not have a regulatory definition in the United States. Our products must be labeled either as conventional foods and beverages or as dietary supplements. The label must also include the net quantity of contents and the supplement facts chart. The supplement facts chart is often a common issue because the regulations that detail what should be in the supplement facts chart are often quite convoluted, and it's a common error found on products shipped to the United States. In addition, the ingredients list must include all the ingredients in the product if they're not named in the chart, and this includes colors, binders, and capsule ingredients. A manufacturer, packer, or distributor must be declared on the label, and it must include the corporate name and the street address of that particular entity. If the entity is found in a local directory, however, you may omit the street address. And lastly, another important detail that many companies are unaware of, dietary supplements must include a domestic U.S. phone number or mailing address on the label to which a consumer can report a serious adverse event. Upon receipt of that report, a company must notify FDA. The dietary supplement charts, as I mentioned, can be quite convoluted because they have specific mandatory format and content elements. Dietary supplement charts are different than the nutrition facts charts found on our conventional foods and beverages in that they only declare certain required nutrients and other dietary ingredients that are actually present in the product. So, for example, you would never have a total fat value of 0 grams in a dietary supplement chart. The serving size in a dietary supplement chart should be based on the maximum amount recommended per eating occasion. So, for example, if your directions state to consume 1 to 3 capsules at breakfast, then your serving size should be 3 capsules. For dietary supplements that direct consumers to consume more than once a day, there is the allowance for having per serving and per day in the dietary supplement chart. FDA also permits you to present information for more than one age or demographic group, for example, vitamin and mineral supplements that maybe have directions for infants and toddlers as well as for adults. Some of you may be aware that FDA updated its nutrition labeling rules in 2016. The changes to our nutrition facts chart on conventional foods and beverages was quite dramatic. However, the changes to the supplement facts charts were not quite so dramatic. However, there are some important differences since the rules came out in 2016. So, for example, if you look at these charts, they are a little bit different than what would have preceded them. Of note, the added sugars declaration and the total sugars declaration are now part of this. FDA changed the mandatory nutrients that must be declared if present. So, for example, vitamin A and vitamin C used to be mandatory, but no longer are. Vitamin D and potassium, however, must be declared if they are present in the product. FDA also added a new disclaimer for supplements that are intended for children 1 to 3 years of age because those percent daily values are based on a 1,000 calorie diet rather than a 2,000-calorie diet. Now, one of the most common ways that companies trip up when they ship dietary supplements to the United States relates to the claims that are made in reference to the product. FDA has a much stricter set of regulations that dictate what may be on a dietary supplement label than can be found elsewhere in the world. These are the three main categories of claims that are often found on food and supplements. Nutrient content claims are those that characterize the level of a specific nutrient, such as high in fiber, low sodium, sugar-free, and so forth. These are actually defined in regulation by FDA. Therefore, any product that makes a nutrient content claim must ensure that the product complies with the requirements and regulation. Similarly, FDA allows certain health claims to describe the risk reduction of a disease related to the consumption of a certain nutrient. These, like nutrient content claims, are written into regulation where, for example, FDA states certain conditions where fruits and vegetables may be able to make claims related to a reduction in the risk of cancer, things like that. These are the only cases where a disease condition may be referenced on a food or supplement label. Much more common, and especially on dietary supplements, are structure-function claims. These describe the role or mechanism of a nutrient or a dietary substance that affects the structure or function of the body. Structure-function claims may describe general well-being from the consumption of the supplement, may also describe effects on conditions that are common but not serious and associated with natural states, but they may not reference a disease state or condition that is commonly associated with the disease. Many people are familiar with the ubiquitous label disclaimer that you see on this slide to the right. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. This is the required label disclaimer for structure-function claims on dietary supplement labels. In addition to the disclaimer, companies must also notify FDA when they make a structure-function claim in association with a dietary supplement. Drug claims are a common reason why dietary supplements are not permitted into the United States. Dietary supplements, as I mentioned, may not claim to diagnose, mitigate, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or class of diseases. They also may not claim effects that imply a disease treatment. So, for example, making a claim that your supplement relieves crushing chest pain is clearly a reference to a heart attack or angina, and FDA will not permit that sort of claim on a dietary supplement, because these types of claims on a supplement can cause FDA to regulate the product as a drug. Again, all going back to the intended use of the product, being related to claims on the labeling, and even if the dietary supplement does not contain an active pharmaceutical ingredient that is intended to treat a heart attack, FDA can still regulate it that way because of that claim on the label. So, for example, the line between structure, function, and drug claims. Okay, a structure-function claims might be claims such as supporting the immune system, helping with occasional sleeplessness, and weight loss. But where you cross the line into a drug claim is when you actually reference or imply disease treatment. So, for example, antiviral, antibacterial, anti-tumor, treating insomnia, or treating obesity. Those are serious disease claims, and FDA will not permit them on a dietary supplement. For companies that find that they have disease claims on their labeling and they've been stopped in port and refused entry into the United States, a common consequence is that FDA will place that company on what's called an import alert for an unapproved drug. As a result, companies that are on this import alert, their shipments will be stopped without any physical examination by FDA, the assumption being that the products still are not in compliance with FDA regulation and will not be permitted to enter the United States. For companies that have products on import alert, it is still possible to get the products in. However, each individual shipment will require the importer to petition FDA and prove that the products are not out of compliance in order for that shipment to enter the United States. So it's a very lengthy and burdensome and time-consuming process, and so the result being that it's just best not to encounter this problem at all and to make sure that your labeling is in compliance before you ship.
Thank you again, Anna. Now we're going to tackle the last portion of the FDA regulation for dietary supplements, and it is perhaps the most complicated of all. It is Title 21, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 111, which is current good manufacturing practice in manufacturing, packaging, labeling, or holding operations for dietary supplements. A note for this regulation applies to not only manufacturers and packagers of dietary supplements, but labelers, holders, and importers. That's correct. So if you source a dietary supplement from outside the United States, this regulation also applies to you. All human food, as the basis of an effective food safety system, requires current good manufacturing practice, or CGMPs. These are very basic rules that you'll need to follow at your facility, such as having washrooms for your employees, encouraging good hygiene practice, having working equipment, running water, plumbing, a roof, having pest control, the use of gloves or hair nets. These are just very basic items that you need to have instituted at your facility. Dietary supplements, then, which is different than conventional foods, require a production and process control system. In this production and process control system, it is designed to ensure that the dietary supplement that's either manufactured, packaged, labeled, or held will be done so in a manner that will ensure the quality of the supplement and ensure that the supplement is labeled correctly. So this has to do with complying with a document that you will create at your facility called the Master Manufacturing Record. This Master Manufacturing Record is necessary for every formulation of dietary supplement you have. So if you have a 5 milligram iron, a 10 milligram iron, and a 15 milligram iron pill, you will need 3 separate Master Manufacturing Records. These Master Manufacturing Records, or MMRs, have what are called specifications in them. These are standards that your product needs to meet for you to consider it as safe for consumption. So it's not adulterated and it's not misbranded. So the first specification would be your component specifications. These are things like your identity specification. What is the dietary supplement? Is it iron? Is it ginkgo? Is it fish oil? Is it green tea extract? How are you going to verify that product meets the identity you have declared? Then next you'll need to specify the purity, the strength, and the composition of the dietary supplement. Is it in a gel capsule? Is it a tablet? Is it a liquid? Is it served in a beverage? As well as the purity, how many contaminants per unit, as well as the strength. And then have limits on adulteration. You need to have specifications that outline if there is a certain amount of adulteration from a certain product or foreign material, when will it reach a threshold where we can no longer consider the product as safe. Lastly, you'll need to have packaging and label specifications, which directly has to do with the regulations my colleague just spoke about. So if we want to get to the core of the dietary supplement regulation, you need to have these master manufacturing records for every formulation of your product. And in them, you're going to identify steps in the manufacturing process where you can implement a control. This control might be testing at a certain point. The control might be weighing the product. The control might be having someone check the label at a certain time period to ensure that it complies. And this needs to be done for every batch of product that you produce. So then you will also be creating batch production records, or BPRs, for every time you create or you manufacture, store, hold, anything, a dietary supplement at your facility. So there's one master manufacturing record for each recipe, each formulation of your dietary supplement, and then for each round of production, you will have a batch production record, and this batch production record will detail how you ensured the product through those controls met the specifications in your master manufacturing record. Registrar Corp offers a whole range of fixed-fee services to assist dietary supplement manufacturers, including registration and U.S. agent, as well as filing prior notice. As we mentioned before, Anna leads a team of 15 regulatory specialists, and we are available to assist with dietary supplement labeling, ingredient, and product reviews, as well as structure function claims. In addition, our food scientists here at Registrar Corp can assist you with a mock inspection at your facility to prepare you for a future FDA inspection, as well as review your dietary supplement master manufacturing records. And lastly, if you have any sort of detentions in port or have detention without physical examination, we are available to assist as well. We have 18 international offices in addition to our U.S. headquarters, so we speak your language and in your time zone. We speak over 30 languages between our 19 offices, so please don't hesitate to get in contact with us. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Jonathan to begin the question and answer session.
Thank you, Bracy and Anna, for that excellent presentation. Again, I'd like to announce that we will be sending a recorded copy of this webinar and a PDF copy of the presentation to all registrants. We will now open up for questions. You may submit a written question anytime during the webinar by using the Ask a Question feature at the top center of your webinar screen. So our first question is, are these rules the same for dietary supplements for animal feed? I'm going to turn this question over to Anna.
Thank you, Jonathan. So we've been focused on human food. Animal feed is regulated by FDA, but in a different manner. Under the regulations for human food, dietary supplements are treated as a separate category. However, this does not apply to animal feed as well. For animal feed, there are two very distinct categories, food and drug, and nothing in between. So while FDA acknowledges that clearly there are supplements for animals on the marketplace where they are not a complete feed, they are still subject to the same rules as regular animal feed. Animal feed, the labeling is very different. So, for example, the nutrition facts charts on our conventional foods and beverages, the supplement facts charts on human dietary supplements, those are not found on the labels for animal feed. FDA has simpler requirements when it comes to the labeling. However, they also defer to a group called the Association of American Feed Control Officials, and that group assists individual U.S. states with labeling and animal feed requirements, among which is a guaranteed analysis statement, which is commonly found on most animal feed in the United States.
Thank you, Anna. Our next question is, What ingredients are not allowed apart from obvious illegal drugs? For example, is Tongkat Ali allowed?
Okay, so one of the interesting things about dietary supplements versus conventional food and beverage is that the dietary ingredients that are the whole point of the dietary supplement, so for example, something like Tongkat Ali, they are exempted from normal food additive regulation. So they do not have to be approved as food additives or generally recognized as safe within the scientific community for conventional foods and beverages. However, FDA did implement a requirement that any dietary ingredient that was not on the marketplace prior to October 1994 is considered a quote-unquote new dietary ingredient, and companies must submit a notification to FDA prior to marketing that dietary ingredient. This notification would include information about the history of the use of that ingredient as well as safety data. So unfortunately, I don't know off the top of my head about Tongkat Ali. It would depend on whether or not it's considered an old dietary ingredient that was on the marketplace prior to 1994, or whether it will be subject to the new dietary ingredient notification requirement. So if a company wants to market a supplement with that ingredient, they must verify whether or not it's considered old and grandfathered in, or whether the new dietary ingredient notification will be required.
Thank you, Anna. Our next question, how can I have a copy of the complete FDA food registration procedures? I'm going to pass this over to Bracy to answer.
Thank you, Bao, for your question. We can definitely assist you with FDA registration. If you'd send us an email to the email listed there on the screen, info@registrarcorp.com, or go to www.registrarcorp.com, we can get you started. If you'd like to go it alone and do the registration yourself, of course, you can go to www.fda.gov. Remember, you will need to designate a U.S. agent, so even though you can complete the registration by yourself, you do need someone resident in the United States to act as your agent for FDA.
Thank you, Bracy. Our next question, is natural sleeping aid considered a function claim? Anna, can you please answer this question?
Certainly. Because a sleep aid assists the body with the function of sleeping, it is considered a structure function claim. And it's a pretty common claim on dietary supplements, ones that contain melatonin, passion flower, commonly marketed in the United States as natural sleeping aids. The interesting part of dietary supplements is that many of them actually have the same intended use as products that are marketed as drugs in the United States. So it's possible to have the same intended use for a drug and a dietary supplement, but have the supplement contain ingredients that are not considered active pharmaceutical ingredients.
Thank you, Anna. And then our next question is, in what channels that the importer can let FDA know of the function claim? So in what channels may the importer let FDA know of the function claim?
The process by which you must notify FDA is a submission of information from someone who has the authority to verify that the claim is substantiated. So this notification is sent to the Center for Food Safety and Nutrition. It must identify the dietary supplement, the dietary ingredient upon which the claim is based, and the actual text of the claim on the label. It must be signed by someone who can assert that the company possesses substantiation that the claim is truthful and not misleading.
Thank you, Anna. For protein shakes, does the label either dietary supplement or nutrition facts depend on the amount of protein grams contained in the product? For example, 20 plus grams versus 10 to 12 grams, or just the intended use. So for protein shakes, does the label either dietary supplement or nutritional facts depend on the amount of protein grams or just the intended use? To clarify.
Okay, so this question is excellent because it really illustrates the fact that there is sort of a gray area when it comes to conventional foods and beverages versus dietary supplements. There are certain products that could be labeled as either. The situation is such that if a dietary supplement is in a conventional food form, such as a shake or a beverage of sorts, a drink, it can still be marketed and labeled as a dietary supplement if it does not, quote, purport, unquote, to be a conventional food or beverage. So, for example, you would not want to call it a drink. You would not want to call it a shake. You would not want to reference conventional food like coffee flavored on the label if you intend to market it as a dietary supplement. FDA gives the manufacturer a certain amount of leeway in deciding how they want to market it. So it would not be dependent on the amount of protein or anything like that.
Thank you, Anna. This next question I'm going to pass over to Bracy. Does the MMR apply to a dietary supplement ingredient company?
Thank you, Susan, for this question. Yes, the MMR could apply to a dietary supplement ingredient company. This all depends on how your food is going to be directed for use after you produce it. So if it is going to solely become incorporated into a dietary supplement later on by another company that then goes on to sell it in the United States, you could be exempt from some of from the MMR requirement. If your product is an ingredient that can later be incorporated into conventional foods, you may be required to comply with different standards. So just almost like labeling, where your intended use determines partly how your product is regulated, what happens to your product after production will determine which food safety standards you need to meet. So I do suggest you get in contact with us so we can get a better idea of that. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Bracy. The next question I am also going to pass to you. In the case of a distributor who holds products in a registered facility which is manufactured by a third-party vendor, is the MMR required to be kept by the distributor in case of an audit?
Thank you, Pilar, for your question. So both you and the registered facility where this dietary supplement is manufactured will be required to have these master manufacturing records. Theirs will be different from yours. You are not required to keep a copy of the manufacturer's because your MMR will be solely on how you will control the quality and maintain the quality of the labeling of the product as it is stored in your facility. So needless to say, your MMR will be shorter and more simple than the MMR of the manufacturer, and you are not required to keep a copy of theirs at your facility.
Thank you, Bracy. The next question, does identity testing need to be done by a third party, or can a manufacturing facility perform it? Bracy?
Another great question. The manufacturing facility can perform it. They must just keep records, and those are your batch production records. And in case of an FDA inspection, FDA may want to see proof that these tests are accurate.
Thank you, Bracy. Our next question, how does the FDA conduct inspections of manufacturing records for overseas manufacturing facilities? Bracy?
FDA conducts inspections of master manufacturing records in the course of a typical FDA inspection. FDA will arrive at your facility. If you're overseas, they will give you notice. In the United States, FDA arrives without any prior notification. Overseas, there is time to plan. When they go to your facility, they will, based on your registration and your products, they will know which regulations apply to you. If you are a dietary supplement manufacturer and you need to have these master manufacturing records, they will probably spend 1 of 2 or 3 days looking over all of your documents and then spend the other time looking at your actual process, looking at how you complete the batch production records. they will essentially be checking every part of your compliance with that specific regulation.
Thank you, Bracy. I'm going to pass the next question over to Anna. And the question is, does the font size for calories have to be increased on the dietary supplement label?
Thank you. Yes. An interesting issue that arose when the rules in 2016 were published. Many of you may be familiar with the new nutrition facts chart where the font size of calories was dramatically increased. Part of the rule also stipulated that the font size in dietary supplements be increased so that it is 2 points larger than the remaining text within the chart. However, FDA later issued guidance that stated that that was a mistake and that they do not intend to require companies to increase the font size of the calories designation in a supplement facts chart. If you look at their examples that are actually part of the regulation, you can see that their examples do not present the calorie count or declaration in a larger font size. So we have proceeded, taking FDA's word, that they will not require this, and at some point in time, they will fix the regulation since they never intended to have that be a requirement.
Thank you, Anna. I have another question for you. Does an email address suffice on a dietary supplement label as a means for a consumer to report an adverse event?
The way that the law is written, it must be a U.S. domestic address or phone number. It does appear based on the guidance issued by FDA that you can use a toll-free number. So, for example, if you do not have an office in the U.S., this may be a solution for you to establish a toll-free number in the U.S. that redirects to your home office, but regrettably an email address will not suffice for that purpose according to the law.
Thank you, Anna. Our next question. I was informed by FDA that prior notice is not required for food samples for testing. Could you please confirm that? Bracy?
Thank you, Anjali, for your question. Prior notice is required even for food samples for testing. You will indicate on the prior notice that the samples are for analysis. I'm unsure why FDA would tell you that prior notice is not required, but indeed it is required. You can file prior notice with us by going to www.priornotice.com. And again, that's www.priornotice.com.
Thank you, Bracy. And I have another question for Anna. Are these rules valid also for medical foods?
Okay, so just for clarification, for those of you who may not be familiar with medical foods are a very, very small subset of foods that are marketed in the United States. A medical food is one that is designed for consumers that have specific medical conditions that have distinct nutritional requirements. And so usually this means that this particular consumer has an inability to metabolize a specific substance or something along those lines. It's a very, very small subset of foods. Medical foods are not considered dietary supplements, and so they are not required to have these labeling elements. They are included in the conventional food and beverage regulations, but they are not required to have the nutritional facts chart that's found on conventional foods and beverages. Anybody who is thinking that their product could possibly be regulated as a medical food should really inquire either with Registrar Corp or with FDA, because as I mentioned, it's a very small subset of food, and a lot of companies get in trouble for marketing their products as medical foods when they don't actually meet the definition of a medical food.
Thank you, Anna. I have another question for you. For statement of identity, can dietary supplement wording be shown on the back of the packaging?
So, Bernard, who asked this question, I guess it depends on what you mean by dietary supplement wording. The statement of identity really is the identity of the product, and so it is typically found on the front of the package that the retail consumer will see, when they're in the grocery store or, a retail outlet. And that statement of identity that identifies the product as a supplement needs to be on what we call the principal display panel, so that front panel that will be displayed to the consumer on the shelf. The other information, such as chart and ingredients, typically will have to be located on what we call the information panel, often the panel immediately to the right of that principal display panel.
Thank you, Anna. Our next question, are the regulations/requirements different for prescription dietary supplements? Anna, can you please answer that question?
So there really isn't a regulatory definition for prescription dietary supplements. Dietary supplements are considered by FDA to be over-the-counter products. So while there are certain dietary supplements such as prenatal vitamins that are commonly either distributed by doctors or doctors, inform their patients that they should be taking something like a prenatal vitamin, there is no regulatory category for a prescription dietary supplement.
Thank you, Anna. Our next question, how does the FDA treat European GMP certificates? I'm going to pass this question over to Bracy.
Thank you, Marius. FDA may take into consideration European Good Manufacturing Practice certificates in the course of an audit. They would be supporting documentation, but they would not preclude you from the requirement of meeting the master manufacturing record and having batch production records, as well as enforcing and having the actual CGMPs implemented at your facility. All right. So whereas it's an excellent certification, they just do not exclude you from complying with FDA as well, and FDA will conduct the same inspection on your facility.
Thank you, Bracy. Our next question, will the FDA be reconsidering its stance on the inclusion of CBD in dietary supplements? Anna?
So for those of you that don't know, CBD refers to cannabidiol, which is a constituent of the cannabis plant and is often marketed in dietary supplements and other sorts of products, including topical creams as well, usually with claims about affecting the structure and function of the body or treating disease. Up to this point, FDA has stated that CBD is not appropriate for marketing in dietary supplements. We don't believe that they are going to change their stance on this, and this is because the definition of a dietary supplement and a dietary ingredient preclude inclusion in this definition of anything that is being tested as an investigational new drug. So CBD is being tested for some serious medical conditions, including epilepsy, by a number of pharmaceutical firms, which automatically means that it will not fall under the definition of dietary supplement or dietary ingredient. So it's very difficult to imagine FDA will reverse course on this, and we strongly recommend not marketing CBD dietary supplements in the United States for risk of enforcement action by FDA.
Thank you, Anna. I have another question for you. Are libido/sexual enhancement claims allowed on a label? Most ingredients which support better blood circulation are marketed as sexual/performance enhancers.
So most of us that are alive and are in the marketplace know that sexual enhancement supplements are pretty commonly marketed abroad, but also here in the United States. What FDA has stated is that these types of claims are appropriate for dietary supplements because they do reference effects to the structure and function of the body, as long as they do not reference a disease condition. So, for example, you could not state that it would help erectile dysfunction or something along those lines. If it is purporting to just help with sexual function in a normal context, then that may be appropriate for a dietary supplement.
All right, thank you, Anna. We will now take our last question, which says, If you became our U.S. agent for FDA purposes, could you be our FSVP agent as well? We need an agent for our dietary supplement, and when we transfer our material to our 3PL warehouse in California. Bracy, I'm going to turn this question over to you.
Sure, and thank you, Herbert, for your question. Registrar Corp does offer U.S. agent for FDA communication services as well as FSVP agent services. So please get into contact with us. We're going to require some information from you, like your labels and your dietary supplement MMRs, but we can definitely see if we're able to assist you with the FSVP agent as well.
Okay. We are out of time, but you may send us additional questions anytime by email to info@registrarcorp.com. This concludes our presentation. We would like to thank all attendees for joining us today.